of India had focused primarily on increasing the hospital-based services for gas victims, thus hospitals had been built after the disaster. When UCC wanted to sell its shares in USL, it was directed by the Supreme Court to finance a 500-bed hospital for the medical care of the survivors. Thus, Bhopal Memorial Hospital and Research Centre, BMHRC, was inaugurated in 1998 and was obliged to give free care for survivors for 8 years. BMHRC was a 350-bedded super speciality hospital where heart surgery and hemodialysis were done. There was a dearth of gynecology, obstetrics and pediatrics. 8 mini-units, outreach health centers, were started and free health care for gas victims was to be offered until 2006. 6. The management had also faced problems with strikes and the quality of the health care being disputed. 55. 56. Samarthana Trust is a charitable trust, registered in 1995, that gives modern as well as Ayurvedic treatments to gas victims, free of charge. 6. 57. Environmental rehabilitation. When the factory was closed in 1986, pipes, drums and tanks were sold. The MIC and the 7 plants are still there, as are storage of different residues. Isolation material is falling down and spreading. 6. The area around the plant was used as a dumping area for hazardous chemicals. In 1982, tube wells in the vicinity of Fusel factory had to be abandoned, and tests in 1989 performed by UCC's laboratory revealed that soil and water samples collected near the factory and inside the plant were toxic to fish. 58. Several other studies had also shown polluted soil and groundwater in the area. Reported polluting compounds include 1 naphthol, naphthalene, 7. Tarry residue, mercury, toxic organochlorines, volatile organochlorine compounds, chromium, copper, nickel, lead, hexachloroethane, hexachlorobutadiene, and the pesticide HCH. 6. In order to provide safe drinking water to the population around the USL factory, the government of Madhya Pradesh proposed a water supply improvement scheme. 59. In December 2008, the Madhya Pradesh High Court decided that the toxic waste should be incinerated at Ankleshwar in Gujarat, which was met by protests from activists all over India. 60. On the 8th of June 2012, the Center for Incineration of Toxic Bhopal Waste agreed to pay $250 million, $3.1 million, to dispose of USL chemical plants waste in Germany. 61. On the 9th of August 2012, Supreme Court directed the Union and Madhya Pradesh governments to take immediate steps for disposal of toxic waste lying around and inside the factory within 6 months. 62. A U.S. court rejected the lawsuit blaming UCC for causing soil and water pollution around the site of the plant and ruled that responsibility for remedial measures or related claims rested with the state government and not with UCC. 63. In 2005, the state government invited various Indian architects to enter their concept for development of a memorial complex for Bhopal gas tragedy victims at the site of Union Carbide. In 2011, a conference was held on the site, with participants from European universities which was aimed for the same. 64. 65. Occupational and habitation rehabilitation. 33 of the 50 planned work sheds for gas victims started. All except one was closed down by 1992. In 1986, the MP government invested in the special industrial area Bhopal. 152 of planned 200 work sheds were built and in 2016 were partially functioning. It was estimated that 50,000 persons need alternative jobs. and that less than 100 gas victims had found regular employment under the government's scheme. The government also planned 2,486 flats in 2- and 4-story buildings in what is called the Widows' Colony outside Bhopal. The water did not reach the upper floors and it was not possible to keep cattle, which was their primary occupation. Infrastructure like buses, schools, etc. were missing for at least a decade. 6. Economic rehabilitation. Immediate reliefs were decided 2 days after the tragedy. Relief measures commenced in 1985 when food was distributed for a short period along with ration cards. 6. Madhya Pradesh government's finance department allocated $874 million, $11 million, for victim relief in July 1985. 66. 67. Widow pension of $200. $2.50 / per month, later $750, $9.40 was provided. The government also decided to pay $1,500, $19, to families with monthly income $500, $6.30 or less. As a result of the interim relief, more children were able to attend school, more money was spent on treatment and food, and housing also eventually improved. From 1990, interim relief of $200, $2.50, was paid to everyone in the family who was born before the disaster. 6. The final compensation, including interim relief for personal injury, was for the majority $25,000, $310. For death claims, the average sum paid out was $62,000, $780. Each claimant was to be categorized by a doctor. In court, the claimants were expected to prove beyond reasonable doubt that death or injury in each case was attributable to exposure. In 1992, 44% of the claimants still had to be medically examined. 6. By the end of October 2003, according to the Bhopal gas tragedy relief and rehabilitation department, compensation had been awarded to 554,895 people for injuries received and 15,310 survivors of those killed. The average amount to families of the dead was $2,200.68. In 2007, 1,029,517 cases were registered and decided. The number of awarded cases was 574,304 and the number of rejected cases was 455,213. Total compensation awarded was $15,465 million, $190 million. 59. On the 24th of June, 2010, the Union Cabinet of the Government of India approved a $12650 million, $160 million, aid package which would be funded by Indian taxpayers through the government. 69. Other impacts. In 1985, Henry Waxman, an American politician, called for a U.S. government inquiry into the Bhopal disaster, which resulted in U.S. legislation regarding the accidental release of toxic chemicals in the United States. 70. Causes. There are two main lines of argument involving the disaster. The corporate negligence point of view holds that the disaster was caused by a potent combination of under-maintained and decaying facilities, or weak attitude towards safety, and an under-trained workforce, culminating in worker actions that inadvertently enabled water to penetrate the milk tanks in the absence of properly working safeguards. 6. 71. The worker sabotage point of view, held by Union Carbide, argues that it was not physically possible for water to enter the tank without concerted human effort. and that extensive testimony and engineering analysis leads to a conclusion that water entered the tank when a rogue individual employee hooked a water hose directly to an empty valve on the side of the tank. This point of view further argues that the Indian government took extensive actions to hide this possibility in order to attach blame to UCC. 72. Theories differ as to how the water entered the tank. At the time, workers were cleaning out a clogged pipe with water about 120 meters, 400 feet, from the tank. They claimed that they were not told to isolate the tank with a pipe slip blind plate. The operators assumed that owing to bad maintenance and leaking valves, it was possible for the water to leak into the tank. 6. 73. This water entry route could not be reproduced despite strenuous efforts by motivated parties. 74. UC claims that a disgruntled worker deliberately connecting a hose to a pressure gauge connection was the real cause. 6. 72. Early the next morning, a USL manager asked the instrument engineer to replace the gauge. USL's investigation team found no evidence of the necessary connection. The investigation was totally controlled by the government, denying UCC investigators access to the tank or interviews with the operators. 72. 75. Corporate negligence. This point of view argues that management, and to some extent, local government, underinvested in safety, which allowed for a dangerous working environment to develop. Factors cited include the filling of the MIC tanks beyond recommended levels, poor maintenance after the plant ceased MIC production at the end of 1984, allowing several safety systems to be inoperable due to poor maintenance, and switching off safety systems to save money, including the MIC tank refrigeration system, which could have mitigated the disaster severity, and non-existent catastrophe management plans. 6. 71. Other factors identified by government inquiries included undersized safety devices and the dependence on manual operations. 6. Specific plant management deficiencies that were identified include the lack of skilled operators, reduction of safety management, insufficient maintenance, and inadequate emergency action plans. 6. 17. Underinvestment. Underinvestment is cited as contributing to a dangerous environment. In attempts to reduce expenses, $1.25 million worth of cuts were placed upon the plant, which affected the factory's employees and their conditions. 19. Kerman argues that cuts meant less stringent quality control and thus looser safety rules. A pipe leaked. Don't replace it, employees said they were told. MIC workers needed more training. They could do with less. Promotions were halted, seriously affecting employee morale and driving some of the most skilled elsewhere. 76. Workers were forced to use English manuals, even though only a few had a grasp of the language. 73. 77. Subsequent research highlights a gradual deterioration of safety practices in regard to the MIC, which have become less relevant to plant operations. By 1984, only 6 of the original 12 operators were still working with MIC, and the number of supervisory personnel had also been halved. No maintenance supervisor was placed on the night shift, and instrument readings were taken every 2 hours, rather than the previous and required 1-hour readings. 73. 76. Workers made complaints about the cuts through their union but were ignored. One employee was fired after going on a 15-day hunger strike. 70% of the plant's employees were fined before the disaster for refusing to deviate from the proper safety regulations under pressure from the management. 73. 76. In addition, some observers, such as those writing in the Trade Environmental Database, TED, case studies as part of the Mandela Project from American University, have pointed to serious communication problems and management gaps between Union Carbide and its Indian operation, characterized by the parent company's sick hands off approach to its overseas operation and cross-cultural barriers. 78. Adequacy of equipment and regulations. The factory was not well equipped to handle the gas created by the sudden addition of water to the MIC tank. The MIC tank alarms had not been working for 4 years and there was only one manual backup system, compared to a 4-stage system used in the United States. 6. 71, 73, 79. The flare tower and several vent gas scrubbers had been out of service for 5 months.